Now there's a story on this one. My name is Ronald J. Coleman. My middle initial was J because if I had been a girl, they were going to name me Jane. I was born April 14th, 1929, and it was born in a log cabin at home. I was born in Spring City, Utah. I was the fifth of five siblings. My dad was named John Henry Coleman. He was born January the 12th, 1882. My mother was named Olive Allred. My mother was born December the 10th, 1889. Boy, I really don't know how they met, because he was a Catholic and my mother was Mormon. And he was 30 years old and she was 23 when they finally got married. And I told my sister, who was the first one that was born, I said, you were born 9 months and 15 minutes later after you got married. And she says, is that so? It was a year and a month later, so I didn't have to, my parents didn't have to get married. In all the time I lived with them, 18 years before I went to college, I never heard him say one bad thing about anybody or anything or argue. It was a great marriage as far as I was concerned. My granddad married two sisters, and he built two homes a block apart and put one sister in one and one sister in the other one. And each one of them had 13 kids. I asked my mother one time, I said, how did Granddad ever determine which one of the two sisters he spent the night with? And she says, well, more often than not, he slept in the barn because he couldn't take any more of either one of them. But he did have 13 kids from each one of them and fulfilled 3 missions for the Mormon Church in the meantime. So he was busy. We had 2 rooms, so everybody was there, slept in one of the rooms, and then we had a little kitchen, and we had no running water. We had to go out to get the water in a well. And when I was about 6 years old, they made me a swing that I could sit in on the outside the house. And I was sitting in the swing, and the neighbor across the street who I used to play with, was having his birthday party. And I was sitting there in the swing, and they said, well, come on over. And I said, I can't come over. I don't have a gift for the boy. They said, you don't want a gift. We don't want a gift. We don't need a gift. Just come over. So I went in and told my brother that I was going across the street, and he gave me a nickel to give to him. And I had 6 years old. I had never seen a nickel before. And so as I was crossing the street, I thought to myself, they said they didn't need to give a gift. I'm not going to give a gift. So I put that nickel in my pocket, and I kept it. Yeah, we had 5 kids. There was Frank. The oldest one was Mary, and she died when she was 97. Frank was Lou, my brother, was the second one, and he died when he was 76. And Frank was the third one, and he died when he was 97. And then Eva, my sister, died when she was 70. When my mother passed away, she was trying to get welfare because we needed it real bad. And so she asked for welfare, and they said, the only way you can get welfare is if you give the title to the home, to the state. So she did. So they then sent her $70 a month. And the first thing she did when she got the $70 is to go to the bishop's office and pay $7 tithing. And somehow along the line, the state found out about it, and they deducted $7 off the $70. My brother went up to the state and wondered why, what's the problem? They said, that money isn't for the church, that's for you to live on. So if you don't need the money and give it to the church, we're not giving it to you. So they deducted the $7. My brother tried and tried, but they never got back that $7. So she was $63. And she was even thinking, even then, she was going to pay her tithing under the table. And my brother said, who later went on a mission, said, "No, you don't, Mom. That's money for you to live on." That was quite a bit, because the most money my dad ever made in his life was the $20 a month. Where I met my wife, Luana, the only thing I remember didn't happen is we didn't meet in a bar, because I don't think she ever went to one. But she worked for a Dr. Sondriger, and I think I had to go see him for some reason when I was working at McGill, Nevada, and met her at the doctor's office. And she had just come out of 2 years of BYU and couldn't go back to school because she didn't have any money. I had just graduated from Snow College 2 years, and I couldn't go back to school because I didn't have any money. So we started dating. In the meantime, I got drafted. So that took care of that. And so in November, we decided, November 22nd, 1950, we got married. We was married in the temple. But just before we got married, Dr. Sondriger called me in, and he said, at that time you had to have a recommend from the doctor. And he said, "Ron," he says, "I just saw a miracle." He says, I don't believe it. He says, because he says, it just doesn't happen anymore. I says, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "The one you're marrying is a virgin." I said, "I know, so am I." He says, that's unusual. He gave me a $100 bill for to get married. I'd never seen a $100 bill in my life. But he gave us a $100 bill, and that's what we did our honeymoon on. We went down and spent 2 nights in Las Vegas and come back. Well, what happened was after we got married, we spent 2 months together, and then I had to leave. I was drafted in the service. So I spent 12 weeks in basic training, and after that, I called Luana, and she come back to Manhattan, Kansas with me. And we had a little 1-bedroom apartment. I could live off base. And we were there for 2 months and got caught in a flood. The flood was coming down. We could have got out at the time, but the guy that rented us the place said, well, in 1905, they had the worst flood they've ever had in Manhattan, Kansas, and it didn't come up to any place near. So they said, you can just put your car up on it was about 4 feet higher than in the street, and it'll be okay. It rained 5 inches that afternoon and night, and here it went, right up over the top of the car, better than 8 or 9 feet in the street. And we were evacuated by boat to get out, and spent several nights in the Kansas State Fieldhouse, along with 1,200 others that was displaced. And when it was made sure that we couldn't get out, they had a big warehouse that was up farther on up, that the flood went in one side of the warehouse and out the other side. Everything that was in it, here it come down the middle of the street, refrigerators, you name it. But there was hundreds and hundreds of brand new tires. So I fixed a rope out to a tree, out past the sidewalk, and then when a tire comes on the inside of the thing, I'd grab it and put it in the house. I had 46 tires before I was evacuated. It was about 8 or 9 days before we could get back in. The only people that could go in there was the National Guard. And when I went back to get into the house, 46 tires were gone. The National Guard had taken every one of them. So that at least somebody got some use out of them as far as that goes. When I went to college at BYU after I got back out of the service, the first day I was in Provo, I applied for this job as night clerk in the hotel. $1 an hour from 11 at night till 7 in the morning, and you could work 7 nights a week if you wanted to. And so he asked if I knew how to balance it. I said, well, I think I know how to balance it. I knew debits and credits are not too bad, and I knew accounting anyway. So he said, okay. So he told me how to balance the thing, and the next morning he come to relieve me, and he said, how'd you go? And I said, not worth a darn. He said, what do you mean? I said, I couldn't balance. I said, it just didn't balance. I said, and I tried it 3 or 4 different times, every other way in the world, and I couldn't balance it. So something's screwy. He says, what were you? Were you under or were you over? And I said, I was over by $17.13. He got a little thing out of his pocket, and he looked here, and the amount was $17.13. He said, you're hired. He said, the last 4 people I've had come in here as night clerk in the hotel balanced. And it was not only their first night, but it was their last night. I took several classes with, now I can't think of his name. Dallin Oaks.
Oh, okay, yeah. So you
Dallin
took a class
Oaks.
from Dallin.
I took several classes with him. And what happened was, I knew from the time I knew him very first that he was going to become an apostle, because he almost shined as far as that goes. And he went back to Harvard and got his law degree and went on from there. But I told him this one night. I said, I may have trouble getting into heaven, so if I do, can I call on you for a little bit of help? And he said, he guaranteed that he could help me, so that took care of that. Then I drove a limo for about 5 years. This used to be Lionel Richie's limo, and I was able to get several Hollywood people in the limo. One of them was Bob Hope. I picked him up at the airport and took him to Park City, where he was had a golf tournament. And I said to Bob Hope, the neighbor next door to me thinks you're the greatest person in the entire world. And she lost one of her legs in a car accident. But I said, if you could give me your autograph. And he said, when do we have to be up to Park City? And I said, at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. This was about 10 o'clock in the morning. He says, let's go say hello to her. I was okay. So we pulled up in front of her place, and she wasn't home. I finally told her that was the case. And I did get an 8x10 picture of him and an autograph. When I picked him up the next year, he said, and this, why you would remember this, I'll never know. He said, do you think she'd be home this time? I said, let's try it again. We pulled up in front of the place, and she was home. So Bob Hope walked into her house, and she about died. She thought that was the greatest thing she'd ever seen in her life. It was her favorite person of all time, and he gave her his autograph in her home. I am really appreciative of the 5 kids that I've got, because they haven't given me one minute's trouble. Not 1 minute. I'm not sure I could have helped them out if they'd have asked for help. But they haven't either hasn't needed it, or they got it on their own, or what have you, because it's very, very appreciative of that. Well, I think they could probably teach me some things as far as that goes, rather than me teaching them anything. But because they've done a real good job all along, and I appreciate it a bunch. when Sue was in college, she used to correct papers for one who ended up as a general authority in the church. But she said that she needed a story about prayer. And so I told her a story about prayer that happened to me. And I said, from the time I was 8 years old till the time I was 18, until I graduated from college, when I graduated from high school, I used to milk 2 cows, morning and night. I prayed that I would go out there and those 2 cows would be dead. Now she claims that I said, finally my prayer was answered. That I went out there this one time, 10 years later, and those cows were dead. So she told that to this professor, and he used that 100 times as his favorite story on prayer, that sometimes it takes longer to get your prayer answered. It can't be immediate. Sometimes it takes as many as 10 years, if that's the case. So we were having lunch here one day when they come by this one time, and we talking about he was going to give a talk in Cedar City. And she said, if you want to, you can go up and hear your story about the cows dying. I says, what do you mean about the cows dying? The cows didn't die. My prayer, I prayed for 10 years, morning and night, that those cows would be dead. My prayer was never answered. And she about crapped. She said, I told him a lie and he's used it 100 times. He says, I can't believe. She says, I know you told me that they both died. I said, they didn't die. I said, when I graduated from high school and went to Kennecott Copper and worked for the summertime, when I come back, both cows were gone because my dad had to sell both of them. But I said, neither one of them died. So she said that was a story about the cows as far as that goes.